I wanted to give you a current event, okay? That is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. You must remember what Amalek has done to you. He said that back in October, latter part of October. You remember him saying that? He's gotten quite a bit of heat for saying that, but I wanted to tell you why he said that, okay? Because that ties into some things that maybe you've forgotten about in your Old Testament studies. He made reference to Amalek as a parallel to Hamas, who attacked Israel, okay, on October the 7th. He referenced the biblical Amalek to justify what they were doing to the Hamas, okay? You must remember what Amalek has done to you, and we do remember. In Deuteronomy, here's the story, okay? Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt, when you were weary and worn out. They met you on your journey and attacked all that were lagging behind. They had no fear of God. Now, this happened after the Egyptian deliverance, okay? When the Lord your God gives you rest from all the enemies around you in the land he is giving you to possess as an inheritance, you shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. Straight from the Old Testament, okay? Deuteronomy 25, 17 through 19. Israel had just been delivered from Egyptian bondage. They were seeking a safe place. The Amalekites attacked them from the rear. And that was especially inhuman because that's where you keep the women and children. When you're in marching formation and everybody's moving, you have the strongest at the front to protect a frontal assault. The folks in the back, come on in. I missed. The folks in the back are protected by the folks in the front. Amalek attacked them from the rear, which means that the most innocent were attacked. The Amalekites did that. God didn't forget that, by the way. In fact, there is no Amalekite nation or any such nation like that or related to that nation. And Hamas did essentially the same thing. They attacked women and children, people in their homes, young people at a music festival, the most helpless. Now, that reference to Amalek has been very, very controversial, and there were huge protests in D.C. yesterday, and the United Nations is trying to get humanitarian aid to Gaza, and it's a mess, but then wars are, by definition, a mess. So anything anybody wants to add to that? I mean, I merely bring it up because we said we'd keep you up to date, and that's something that happened some time ago, and it seems like Netanyahu is getting into some trouble for having said that. But he's simply quoting Deuteronomy, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the words, remember the Alamo.
Yeah, a Texan would remember that, Johnny. Yes. Exactly, that fires them up. It said, remember Amalek. Okay, they say, remember Hamas. Okay. Well, I wanted to revisit the study of millennial theology this morning and finish it up to complete the examination of the different millennial theories that there are and how the millennium affects the way our people in the United States feel about supporting Israel, okay? Now, I'm going to be sharing with you some stuff that you're going to say, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that, and that's fine. I don't agree with it either, okay? But I'm merely putting it out here so that you will understand why there is a stream of support in the United States that comes from the evangelical community, and particularly millennialists who believe that we should do everything possible to support Israel, and that they have a theological, biblical, what they call a biblical reason for doing it, okay? So you'll say, well, we're hashing through some millennial theories, and some of you have been in the class. We did this in Revelation, but it's I tell you, every time I go back over this, I learn something new. So I restudied the issue, the millennial issue, and we'll go back through it again. After Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, God reiterated a promise that he made to Abraham. He said, I'll make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents, and there he built an altar to the Lord. This was not a static promise. You'll say, well, promises, aren't they static? I would call this a liquid promise, which doesn't mean God's dishonest. It means that it gets changed, okay? Sometimes it gets adjusted. I'm going to give you an example in just a moment of why this is important to note. And we're not in the millennial study yet, but I wanted to touch on this. It came up in my daily readings, and I looked at Deuteronomy and in my daily readings, and there it was. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, well, God made this promise in Genesis chapter 13, but when Israel went into Canaan, there were some rules God wanted them to follow about where they were supposed to go and not go, okay? Now, I don't know how visible this is, but this area, if I go off screen, I'll be in trouble. But at the bottom, you're right, and here we go. The bottom part, if you'll look at the kind of, what is that, kind of a greenish gold at the bottom, that's Edom. And then the purple is the kingdom of Moab. The gold near the top, or orange, is kingdom of Ammon. Now remember, Moab is one of the descendants of Lot, as is Ammon. Those are direct descendants of Lot. Edom, they are the descendants of Esau. So these are all related. These folks are all related. If you look at the red, that's Philistia. That's where the Philistines live. And if you're thinking, wow, that's really close to where Gaza is, you would be correct, okay? This is what they believe the map of this area looked like during the time of Deuteronomy 2 through 3, okay? And by the way, I've checked numerous sources, and you know how it is, okay? You have to double check and triple check everything, and I'm still not sure. But there is steadfast testimony that the Philistines and the Palestinians are not related, okay? I found that from numerous sources, but I just find it so interesting and weird that how could that be, and it be almost exactly the same place as Philistia existed in ancient times. So anyway, I'll just tell you that they'll say there is no genetic connection, no family connection between Philistines and Palestinians as we understand them today, okay? Now, here was the rule, okay? This is what the Lord made some specific commands about how they were supposed to come in to Canaan, all right? It says, then we turned back and set out toward the wilderness along the route to the Red Sea as the Lord had directed me. For a long time, we made our way around the hill country of Seir. Now, Seir is that bottom yellow, darkish yellow area. That's the kingdom of Edom, all right? Seir is synonymous with Edomites, all right? Then the Lord said to me, you have made your way around this hill country long enough. Now turn north. Give the people these orders. You are about to pass through the territory of your relatives, the descendants of Edom. Now, if you will look at, there's a little dotted line that goes from the very south part of this map, goes up through Edom. That's where they were, this is kind of thought to be where they were going. They are passing through Edom, all right? Give the people these orders. You're about to pass through the territory of your relatives, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war. Notice, all this area that was promised to Abraham, don't provoke these people to war. I will not give you any of their land. Wait a minute. I thought God said he was going to give it to give Abraham everything and all of his descendants. Well, to Abraham's descendants, but to Jacob's descendants? I have given Esau the hill country of Seir as his own. So Edom had promised land too. God owns this. He says, I have given this land to them. Then you go to the next. So we went on past our relatives, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. That's that dotted line through the bottom part of our map. We turned from the Arabah road, which comes up from Elath and Ezion-Geber, and traveled along the desert road of Moab. Continue that dotted line again as you go through Moab. Okay? Then the Lord said to me, do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any part of their land. I've given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. So that's not promised land for Israel either. Okay? It's not like God said, I'm going to let you have everything. God was very specific. You got to let some of these people live. A lot of this is live and let live. Okay? Don't harass them. Don't bother Moab, and don't mess with them. Not everything in what is now called Israel was to be possessed by Israel. Okay? I'm just simply mentioning this for informational purposes. Okay? It's not like God said, you can have it all. No, that's not what he said. He promised this to Abraham's descendants, not to Israel's. Remember, Abraham's descendants, lots of descendants. That includes all Arab people. All the descendants, everybody who lives in the Middle East now is basically a descendant of Abraham. Okay, all Semitic peoples. That includes, by the way, Arab, under the rubric of Semitic peoples, you say, well, those are Jews. No, Semitic peoples are all peoples of Middle Eastern descent. So they're all Abraham's folks, all right? People that are some way related to him. I just wanted to bring that up as a way of clarification, okay? Now, I want to go back over any questions about any of this, okay? Just, again, kind of setting a backdrop for what's going on. Now, the millennial kingdom, let's talk about that. I'm not going to bore you with a rehash of everything, but I do think we ought to look at some of it. In Revelation 21 through 6, let's look at this again, because we're going to look at this in more detail and to give you an idea as to why some Americans feel the way they do about Israel, that we should protect them to the hilt, and that we have a biblical reason for doing that. And before you say, well, I don't know of anybody that believes that, I'm going to tell you that the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives believes this. Okay? I'm just telling you. Mike Johnson believes this. He has said he believes this. So I'm just saying, don't say that nobody believes this in politics. There are people in very powerful positions who believe this. I am not saying Mike Johnson's full of it. I'm not saying I condemn him for it. I'm just stating it, okay? That this is what he believes. So you can't just blow this off and say this. He represents an awful lot of people in this country who believe this, who sincerely believe this. Okay. About the 1,000-year reign and Israel's part in all this. Okay. Jumping ahead. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss and holding in his hand a great chain. This is before the second coming, all right? This is before the second coming. At least in Revelation 20, we're near the end of the book, almost to judgment. You're just a few verses before the final judgment seat. I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it over him to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time. I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshiped the beast or its image and had not received its mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him for 1,000 years. So let's review the storyline here. Satan is chained and he is thrown into the abyss, some dark place in the spiritual realms, okay? He is greatly limited in what he's able to do. Martyrs come to life again, all right? And they reign with Christ 1,000 years. I'm simply reviewing the text. Thirdly, the martyrs are raised to life to reign with him. Well, I said that, didn't I? The rest of the righteous dead, though, remain in their graves. Okay? They're not raised. Not everybody, in the story of the 1,000-year reign, not everybody's raised. That is the first resurrection. All right? But a second resurrection occurs right before the judgment. Okay? That comes. Correct. That's right. Okay? I'm simply telling you the story according to Revelation 20. There's nothing mysterious here. Now, what do you do with all this? Okay? Well, there are three main schools of thought. I talked about postmillennials last week. The missionary to Jerusalem, American Restoration Movement missionary J.T. Barclay, who was a physician, went to Jerusalem in 1850. It took him several months to get there. Didn't arrive till 1851, right before our Civil War. He worked in Jerusalem for 3 years. He made about 22 converts in 3 years. But he did help treat malaria patients, about 2,000 malaria patients. Malaria was raging in Jerusalem at the time. Some say it was his work there was a magnificent failure. I say that God had other plans other than evangelism for Barclay. He was there to help sick people, and he was used mightily. He took his whole family there, and as you'll remember, they sat on the front yard of their home in Virginia, and Barclay, one of his kids was reading from the Bible about Jerusalem, about Romans the 11th chapter, how Israel would all come to salvation. And it came to Barclay in that moment that he needed to go and hasten that. If the Lord's going to come, I need to go and start converting Jewish people, and I need to go to Jerusalem. And the American Christian Missionary Society sent him and his family. And after 3 years, they pretty much ran out of money, and the work wasn't very successful. They returned a second time and stayed another 3 years, but by the time they had returned the second time, only about 3 converts still left. They lost almost everybody. They said that the Muslims treated them better than Christians and Jews did. I guess the Muslims were not as threatened, but there were Orthodox folks and Catholics that were already there, and they were very hostile to Barclay, as were the Jewish people angry with him. So, Barclay and Campbell and Stone were postmillennial. They believed that Christ would return after a symbolic millennium. In other words, that there would be a great outbreak of righteousness on the earth, that there would be peace. Post means that the Lord would come for final judgment after a 1,000-year reign. Okay? That's why they call it post, means after. Okay? It would be a golden age of the church that would happen before the coming. Mentioned this last week. This theory has fallen out of favor simply because people don't tend to be very optimistic these days. If the Lord's going to come, we need to have this golden age of righteousness and of the church, that people, and that we would have Jews and Gentiles converting to Christ, and then the Lord would come. Barclay and Campbell and all of the Restoration Fathers all believed. I don't know if they held it all the way till their death. In fact, some of them were quite disillusioned during the Civil War, and they lost this sense of golden ageism and optimism. They said, "No, this can't be possibly right." we were misled. But anyway, Jews and Gentiles would convert to Christ, and then the time of the end would come. Now, in Romans 11 passages we've looked at, 25, Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in, and in this way all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. As far as the gospel's concerned, they, the Jews, are enemies for your sake, but as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Just as you who were at one time disobedient to God have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience, so they too have now become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. So we have a promise, a calling that Paul calls irrevocable, that Jews are God's people, that this calling upon Jews is for all time. And it does seem to indicate, and here's something interesting, the passage that's quoted here has to do specifically with Judaism. He's not really talking about Gentiles here. In verse 26, as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. He's talking to a specific race of people when he quotes this passage, okay? And this is my covenant when I take away their sins. It does certainly sound like something is coming for Jewish people. Postmillennials believe that sincerely, that when the hastening of the coming of the Lord would happen when the Jews are converted. All right, let's move on. Amillennials, all right, are people who do not believe in a literal millennium, okay? That the 1,000 years is a totally symbolic 1,000 years. This is the most popular theological viewpoint among members of the American Restoration movement today. This would be Churches of Christ, independent Christian churches, and Disciples of Christ. Not everybody is amillennial. Not everybody believes the 1,000-year reign is symbolic. But I'm pretty safe in saying that the overwhelming majority of us believe that it's symbolic, entirely symbolic. Even though our forebears historically embraced postmillennialism, it is not the predominant view of these groups now. Amillennialism is. We believe that this vision that John had of a millennium was the age of the church itself. That this is the age of the church. That we are now in the millennium. That Christ is reigning through his people. The martyrs are lifted up with honor and are venerated among us. And the first resurrection that is spoken of here has reference to those of us who've been raised to walk in newness of life. Okay? You see where we're going with this? The second resurrection would be when Christ comes and he raises all the dead. And that is the most popular view, overwhelmingly, among our folks in our tribe. Again, we are not unanimous. Those of you who have studied with me on Wednesday night know that we're not unanimous, but I'd say the vast majority of us believe that this is symbolic, okay? Quick review. I went right through just from memory. That's pretty good for an old guy. Now, premillennialism. We didn't talk about this last week, but this is where folks get their ammunition for. This is why we need to support Israel, okay? Premillennials differ with this dramatically. They will tell you, and again, I'm carrying information so you'll know. And I'm not making fun of them. I'm simply trying to present the information fairly. They will tell you that our view of Revelation 20 as being entirely symbolic is overly simplistic and not faithful to Scripture. They will say, well, you're not taking the Bible literally. And they say you're not taking doing the revelation of John justice because you're milking all the power from the passage. This is what they'll tell you. And it doesn't amillennialism does not account for every detail in Revelation 20. And I have to give them that. It does not account for every detail. There are basically two different schools of thought in premillennialism, and one is radically different from the other. And it's really important that we at least know something of the second one that we're going to talk about. There is classical premillennialism, and then there is dispensational premillennialism. Don't get lost in the terminology, okay? Please don't. There'll be no quizzes, all right? But basically, premillennials believe that the Lord is going to return to the earth twice, all right? Not symbolically, but objectively, the Lord's going to come twice. They believe that the Lord is going to return the first time to set up his kingdom on the earth, a 1,000-year reign, literal, which will take place in Jerusalem, and then the end will come, and the heavens and new earth will be inaugurated, and the new Jerusalem will come down, and then we'll be in bliss forever. This is the view. This is classical premillennialism. This is the view of a few dozen churches of Christ in the United States. From 1915 until 1940, the period between World Wars I and II, churches of Christ divided over this issue. Around 1900, there's little history about anyone dividing up the churches about anything. But about this time, between 15 and 40, between the Great Wars, there was some division about this. James A. Harding was around 1900, embraced premillennial teaching. James A. Harding was the founder of Harding University. He was a premillennialist, okay? And during 1915 through 1940, there were divisions developing over a number of issues, like cooperation between churches to support orphans' homes, okay? Some of us have history with this. And cooperating in mission efforts, okay? We had divisions over that. We had divisions over liberalism, what's right and what's wrong. And people became, I think one historian called it the hard style. We kind of developed a hard style in the 20s and 30s where differences of opinion were not tolerated and churches were splitting. Fear of liberalism, fear of premillennialism began to take hold, and people were dividing because they were afraid. Around 1915, a fellow by the name of R.H. Boll, B-O-L-L, pushed back against this tide of opposition to premillennialism. And as a result, several dozen churches, which are still, many of them still in existence today, broke away from mainstream amillennialism, which believes in symbolic thousand, to premillennialism. We visited, Deb and I visited a premillennial church in New Albany, which still exists, Indiana. We were very warmly welcomed there. What's interesting about the premillennial churches, and I've read some of their stuff, is that they're very peaceful in spirit. They're not angry folks at all. I think we're more afraid of them than they are of us. They kind of have a live and let live attitude. But it was the only time that I ever heard a public prayer. And I told Deb this at the time it happened. I said, I've never heard a public prayer before that prayed for the peace of Jerusalem, but they prayed for the peace of Jerusalem in that church. And I thought that was, well, that's biblical, by the way. You can find it in Scripture, but I thought that was very that was, what was that? It was the 90s. It was in the 90s. Yeah, it was in the 90s. We were in New Albany for a family reunion. What's really interesting about my family, my mother's family especially, my mother's family, they were non-institutional folks, very conservative. My mother and dad were both converted in that, in a church in New Albany, which is what would have been called anti. Anybody know that? Anti-churches. And my parents ended up kind of studying their way out of that. They left to go into more mainstream churches of Christ. But there is a premillennial church in New Albany. There are mainline churches, premillennial churches, and anti-churches in New Albany. So instead of going to the anti-church, which a lot of our group did for the reunion, we said, let's go to the premillennial church. We'd never been there before. So we went, and they were lovely, lovely people. They used to have, I don't know if they still do, they used to have their own publication, as a matter of fact. So that supported this group. They don't wear the viewpoint on their sleeve. I didn't hear anything about premillennialism in the service at all, as I recall, but I'd remember the prayer for the peace of Jerusalem, because they believe, premillennials especially believe, that there is something significant and important about literal Jerusalem and literal Israel. Very important. They say that God is not done with them. Premillennialists are pretty well unanimous. God is not done with them. And if you read Romans 11, like we just did, you kind of scratch your head. You say, well, it sure reads like it, like God's not done with Israel quite yet. But anyway, so when Jesus comes, the dead will be raised in two stages. There'll be a first coming and there will be a second coming. He will raise some to participate in the 1,000-year reign. Talks about martyrs being raised, those that were beheaded. And then there will be the second resurrection, just ahead of the final judgment. Premillennial teaching says that 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17, which is a very popular and well-known verse to us, actually has to do with the second resurrection, not the first. Okay, they will say, for the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Verse 17, we who are still alive, that's here on earth, will be caught up together with them, those martyrs who have been resurrected in the first resurrection. That's their explanation. That's the them, okay? Hope that doesn't throw you, but that's how they deal with that passage, okay? This reference. Here's historic premillennialism, classical, all right? I circled the first resurrection and the second resurrection, where there is, the historic premillennialism talks about a time of tribulation before the first coming. This is premillennialism. The first resurrection occurs, okay? The return of Christ has the first resurrection, then the millennium where the Satan is bound, the kingdom is consummated, okay? Jesus takes his place on the throne of David and reigns for 1,000 years from a literal Jerusalem. Then there is Armageddon at the end of that 1,000-year reign. By the way, that doesn't fit with the chronology of Revelation. I'm just telling you, but this is how they deal with it. Then there'll be Satan is loose, there'll be a great fight at the very end of time. Then the final judgment, which results in the resurrection of everybody who's dead, both the good and the bad, all right? And the judgment, and then the new heavens and the new earth, okay? That is classical premillennialism, but that's not the, and that's the view of premillennials within churches of Christ that are premillennial, okay? But that is not the view of people like Mike Johnson and other evangelicals. They hold what's called dispensational premillennialism, okay? Their dispensational premillennialism, let me give you an example. John Hagee, dispensational premillennialist, okay? Dallas Theological Seminary, big Baptist seminary, hugely influential and important Baptist seminary, where a lot of the guys that are Baptist pastors in this area and all over the world went to school. DTS has widely disseminated dispensational premillennialism. Here's the problem, and it's going to be, they say that Christ does not yet reign on David's throne. Okay, that's important. To me, that's important. They say Christ is not now reigning. That has not happened yet. This is their argument. He has not yet fulfilled all the prophecies about Messiah. Some of these make me shiver. Christ will reign on David's throne in Jerusalem. We've talked about that. And this bothers me a lot. This makes me shiver. These folks truly believe that the temple, with all of its sacrifices and the law of Moses, will be reinstituted. They believe this. Right down to their feet, they believe that. Okay? All that's going to be reinstituted during the millennium. That Israel will be nationally converted and restored to Palestine. Okay? To Palestine, to all of that area. To all of that area. That it's all going to be Israeli. Okay? That there will be a mass migration of Jews to Israel. Okay? And that they will be converted to Christ during the millennium, when Christ reigns from David's throne in Jerusalem, literally. Okay? The lost 10 tribes of Israel that were lost in the Assyrian exile, when Assyria in 722 BC, when the northern kingdom all went away and were dispersed, and the Samaritans came from them and several other races of people. Well, they're saying the lost 10 tribes of Israel are going to be gathered together. There was I don't know how many of you heard of Garner Ted Armstrong, Herbert W. Armstrong, the Worldwide Church of God. They had a very bizarre, I don't know how to else to put it. It's a kind of a bizarre, off-the-wall view that there's a bunch of lost Jewish tribes in Great Britain. And that those Jews are going to be drawn to Jerusalem someday. Okay, they've written books about it. Okay, but that's where that the lost 10 tribes are everywhere, but that all these tribes are going to be gathered in Israel someday. Okay, here are my issues with dispensational premillennialism, and I hope they're issues for you too. It denies the present kingship of Jesus. This is a huge issue. This is huge. What you're saying, if you believe that he's not yet sitting on the throne of David, what you're saying is that he's not king yet. Is there any doubt in our minds, is that not a central tenet of Christianity, that Christ is the king to today, now? He's king now. Okay? Oh, it gets worse. It essentially contends that the Godhead failed when Jesus came the first time. That the work of Jesus being king is not yet accomplished in the person of Jesus yet. They say, oh, he's got to go to Jerusalem. He has to conquer unbelievers. We have to have this happen. That Jesus is not fully king yet. That's dispensational premillennialism. By the way, classic premillennialism, which I talked about first, they believe there's a kingship now and a kingship later. Okay? Dispensationalists say no. Jesus failed. I'm not making that up. That Jesus failed. And that it's necessary that he return so he can succeed. That that God had planned for the Jews to accept Jesus. When the Jews rejected Jesus, then God said somewhere, well, we got to go to plan B. That's very sad. And it is, of all doctrines, it's the falsest of the doctrines that come out of dispensational premillennialism, okay? But understand, we have very influential Americans and denominational leaders in Christianity who believe this. They believe this. All you have to do is look it up. Some of our most prominent evangelists, people that you would know about, believe this. Not within our fellowship, but outside of our fellowship, who are widely accepted. And why institute the temple sacrifices when all through Hebrews and the New Testament we are told repeatedly that Christ's sacrifice is enough? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And yet they say this is no, the Old Testament prophecies have not been fulfilled yet, and that there's going to have to be a reinstitution of the temple sacrifices, which the writer of Hebrews says cannot forgive us of sins. I mean, the blood of bulls and goats.
All of that demeanor's got power.
Yeah, it is one of the most troubling things. And now maybe you get a sense for, if you believe this, you would sense urgency about needing to set up an earthly kingdom in Israel. If you believe this. And so that's why many, many evangelicals, quote unquote, which I don't like the term, but anyway, Russell Moore is an interesting guy. He's executive editor for Christianity Today, which is a Protestant publication, widely read across denominational boundaries. I'm a regular reader, as are tens of thousands of others. He wrote about it's a great time to be an evangelical because they take the Bible seriously. He wrote an article this past week about that, and I thought that was interesting that would, just saw this article a couple of days ago, and he released it on, I think on Thursdays when he released it. So it's a great time to be evangelical. Well, Russell Moore believes in this too. He's a very well-known ex-Baptist. He's not a Baptist anymore, but a very well-known ex-Baptist who holds this view. Very troubling to think that, you mean God failed? He has to have a second try at this. That's very troubling to me. So, any comments or questions about this? Yes.
How many of the three scenarios you put out there, put them together, not as an individual belief of each one, but taking parts of each one that is stated in it and everything, and then compare it to the world that we see today?
Mm-hmm.
How much of that would you relate to what you see going on across the world?
You mean taking all the different theories and kind of mishmashing them together?
Putting them together and then looking across the globe as what we see going on.
Yeah.
The timeline you had there when Satan was released.
Right. Right.
And then you look at what's going on religiously in the world today.
Yes.
How close to that does that correlate to what we're seeing?
Oh, there it is.
But Satan is loose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now I look back past 10 years, 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I see that I think Satan's been released.
I think he's been loose for a while.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about it.
That's what you're saying.
There's other parts of it there that doesn't correlate with what I have seen happen in the world, but other parts of it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we in that time frame right now?
It depends on. Are you asking for my opinion?
Yeah.
I think we're in that period now. I'm probably an amillennialist, but I'm not a perfect amillennialist because I can't figure out some of the stuff that's in Revelation 20. It doesn't. There's some things about that first and second resurrection that don't just jive. Yeah, I'm thinking theologically though. There's some things that when I read Revelation 20, I can't make quite fit into amillennial, all of it. I'd say the great vast majority of it, yes. I think if I'd been born in the 1800s and had listened to Campbell, I would have probably been a postmillennial. I probably would have agreed. And I guess because postmillennialism and amillennialism are really close. I mean, postmillennialism believes in a symbolic reign, not a literal 1,000 years.
And I go back through my time frame of my life and recent history within what would be the world. The 1900s up to the 1950s were a very religious time frame, at least here in the United States. You look at that, and then you get the 50s to 60s area, things started floating away from religion. Then you look at things today, the way they are, non-believers, what's going on. I feel like it may be time that Satan was released. If you look at what's going on in Israel right now, it correlates with other things that, throughout the Bible, what it says, and everything. Are we there?
We thought this in 1967 when Israel went to war. I vaguely remember that discussion. Is that what's happening? And that was, 57 years ago. So
Hitler killed 6 million Jews.
that's a huge, that's one of the great genocides of all time.
So Paul, you can look at this from all these scenarios here, talking about people turning to the church. You can also realize that people become much more religious when they realize that something out of their control. World War I, World War II, and all the various scares we have drive people to church. Okay. Also, humans are very, very, very influential. They're easily influenced. Okay. And you refer to this. I think that this is true within some powerful people in the United States. Okay. But most people would not know this. I think many people are either choosing to support Israel because they're democracy that believe in people's rights.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
versus those that don't, and they see them being attacked. And that's been overly stated many times. The United States supports people who are considered a democracy. And I think we have to be cautious that whichever way the wind blows in the news reporting, many people follow that. And today, the attacks that have been happening supporting Hamas are the same way.
Yeah.
Not realizing that those individuals that are probably doing the protesting are the first people Hamas would kill.
I know.
I know. People are so easily swayed by this. And this is an example. You said if you had been in that time frame, you followed
I probably would have been.
because he was influential. People are easily influenced by those influence.
And I tend towards the symbolism of the 1,000-year reign because if you read Revelation, I know Sharon, the deep dive into Revelation will show you got to be careful about literal numbers. Johnny?
Everything has been set in motion. And does it really matter? When we die, it doesn't matter about any of this. It's all been set in motion. Is that right?
One fella, before he died, I'll never forget a hospice patient. He was at the Willard Walker home in Fayetteville. And he was a strong believer in Christ, just inspired people that went to see him. And he likened what was about to happen to him to, they're strapping me in the roller coaster and I'm about to go on this fantastic ride. And I thought, wow, that's a great attitude to have. It's going to be exciting and wonderful and I'm going to see things that beyond believing. And the things are set into motion now. Things are coming to a conclusion. How far along? I don't know. Yes, you had your hand up a minute ago, quite a while ago.
In your study, when you, of course, obviously they believe that Jesus is going to be in that ruling capacity in Jerusalem. What scripture reference do they turn to say, and I have an obligation to prepare that place for you?
It's really, that's a great question. It's really kind of a logical, it was like Well, they talk about the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. That we want to, and that Romans 11 says that there's going to be a return of Jews to Christ. There's going to be that's going to happen before the end. And so they kind of put two and two together. And
So it's just kind of, they believe it's gonna happen, they feel like as his follower, they need to.
yes, as followers, we need to be sure that we are part of that plan that is unfolding, as John said, that thing that's coming. We want to be part of that. We want to hasten that along. The Lord's coming. And so it's just kind of a logical thing. We want to hasten the coming of the Lord, which means that we need to support Israel and make sure they get all the land that they need and that they're supreme in that area so that we can set up David's kingdom where Jesus can sit on the Davidic throne. You know, so,
As if God can't do that?
as if God couldn't do it, as if God didn't already do it. So.
Some people liken it to you're doing something complicated and a little child wants to help.
Yeah, right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, you're doing calculus on your computer, and a 5-year-old comes up and says, "Can I help, Daddy?" "Sure, come on up here." Yeah, right. Come on up, help me. Yeah, that's like us telling God how to do His business.
I said that God created us in His image, but all too often we try to recreate it.
Yeah. Let me say this about millennials, and then we'll let you go. I don't think the millennial issue is a salvation issue. I think there's lots of room to disagree. I think, though, we need to be aware of the power of this dispensational premillennialism, particularly the power of that, and the people who hold that power, who hold that view, and will enact that in their thinking, in policy, in public policy, since it's already there in their heads. So, you know, they're likely to go to bat for more military aid for Israel, no matter what, because they're Jews. So, yeah. Yeah, Linda?
I'm confused about something.
Me too.
Jerusalem is not in Israel.
Now, what's that?
Jerusalem is not in Israel, it's in the West Bank, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Well,
Well, it's
no, it's in Israel.
in Israel. It's a divided city.
It comes right after.
Yeah, it's a divided city. I mean, it's divided.
West Bank is
Part of,
the nation of Israel.
right,
Well, yeah, but
Right.
we don't really consider what all is there real well.
Right.
What I was confused about was, all right, Jerusalem is right on the border.
yeah.
So it's still part of it.
When President Trump moved, was it the embassy?
Yes.
When they moved the embassy to Jerusalem, premillennialists were ecstatic. They were absolutely ecstatic. You remember? I mean, there was great praise given President Trump. I'm not talking politics, I'm just saying what happened. There was a great outcry of praise to God on account of that, because they believed that that was necessary for the coming to happen, for Jesus to come. They thought that's a great big step in the direction of fulfillment of Romans 11. So,
And we convince God to come and Jesus to come.
right, we're hurrying it along. Yeah, like, Lord, we got you in a half Nelson, man. We just moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So there you go, Lord. Come on now. Okay, all right. Yeah. He's coming. We'll all agree He is coming, and He's going to raise the dead, and it's going to be a glorious day. And we need to be sure that no matter what happens on this earth before that coming, that we are firmly anchored to Jesus, who is the King now and forever. Amen. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Paul.
You bet.